Life on the early Louisiana frontier was as rough and rugged as anything seen out west, with its ill-tempered climate of scorching hot and humid summers, followed by a long rainy season, with a frost or two during the brief winter months, and its unpredictable and at times very violent weather, along with its fearsome wildlife that stalked the grim pine thickets and haunting soggy marshes and cypress-dimmed swamps. Southwest Louisiana was seen as a desolate and savage land, fit for only the most fearless souls alive at the time, who carved out their days in the backwoods and swamp bottoms, living off the land. And it was also known as a hideout for every desperado and outlaw band who roamed the ominous woods all across the southwestern edge of Louisiana. Altogether, the area south of the Red River to the Gulf of Mexico, between the Sabine and Calcasieu rivers, is a tad bit bigger than the state of Connecticut, and sits on mainly flat terrain occupied by the dense vegetation of the lower Piney Woods region that runs from the lower Ozarks in central Arkansas down to the coastal plain of the southern end of Calcasieu Parish. This deeply forested area is also known as the Big Thicket, and is home to more species of trees and plants than just about any region on the planet. This area alone accounts for about half of Louisiana's total annual rainfall, which makes it the wettest state in the continental United States and is second only to Hawaii for its yearly precipitation. The Piney Woods region is one of the most diverse ecosystems on Earth, and runs a close second to the Amazon rainforest for its wide range of plant and animal life. There were several cash crops grown across the region, with corn, russet potatoes, sweet potatoes, watermelons, rice, and sugarcane being the most prominent, and a few large cotton fields scattered across the southwestern corner of Louisiana. These crops were raised and sold for hard cash or traded for other useful goods such as fabric and sewing necessities, used to make clothing, or for important tools essential for survival in the rugged pines and marshlands such as firearms and ammunition, as well as plowing shears and other household items that couldn't easily be made at home and were basic necessities at the time. The livestock trade also had a big role in this area during that day, with the beef, pork, and poultry businesses being important industries across southwest Louisiana until the arrival of the railroad and timber companies at the tail end of the 1890s. The average home in these rough and tumble parts were usually simple 1 or 2 room shacks, built either from plank boards split from felled trees, or simple log houses stacked out of timber from the dense pine forest that covered this region. The roofs were then covered with rough split wood shingles, and then sealed with a thick pine sap-based roofing tar. These dwellings were either whitewashed using a mix of lime and water to make a rustic paint, or treated with a coating of coal oil and later kerosene that helped preserve the wood and keep out moisture that causes wood rot and attracts termites. A small outhouse would be built some distance away. These function like a modern porta potty found on many construction sites in our own time, and everything from old newspapers, magazines, and corn cobs were used in lieu of modern toilet paper. In the days before electricity was available, any activities or business that took place after dark were either done by the light of homemade candles, usually molded from a mixture of beeswax and dried grease from animal fat, or by the glow of a lantern fueled with well or coal oil. Without refrigeration, ice was a rare commodity, and any meats were dried and cured with salt in smokehouses, and in many cases stored in wooden barrels and topped off with water. Beverages were either served at room temperature, or cooled at the bottom of wells, or tucked away in cellars, or were simply buried in the ground. Fruits were either ground up in jam or sealed in jars of syrup, and vegetables were preserved by pickling them in vinegar. In those days, the fur and trapping trade was big business, and men drifted through here from all over in pursuit of every type of animal hide found in this region. Beaver pelts, coon skins, and even snake and alligator skins were just some of the hides trapped, skinned, and stretched for profit. With wolves, foxes, and on a few occasions bears were also hunted and skinned for their furs. Hunting wild game wasn't so much of a sport back then, and was a critical part of surviving in the thickets and wetlands of our corner of the early American frontier. And a large portion of the meat consumed at the dinner table came from game hunting, with white-tailed deer, wild hogs, squirrels, and rabbits being the most common critters that were hunted or trapped to be grilled and served up as part of that evening's meal. Fishing was also a fairly reliable way of keeping the family fed back then. And everything from largemouth bass, blue cat, to white perch was snagged from the nearest fishing hole and added to the frying pan and family cook pot. Folks around here were keen to take advantage of the abundant waterways that cut through this part of what became known as Sportsman's Paradise, and a few folks even managed to scratch out a humble living in the fishing trade, selling everything from bass, catfish, and even live bait along the banks and sandbars of the rivers, creeks, and bayous all over the backwoods of southwest Louisiana. Life on a farm here on the rugged Louisiana frontier was a grueling, back-breaking, 6-day-a-week job that tended to last from sunup to sundown. A farmer would steer a plow pulled by a horse or a mule, and at times an ox or a bull, over several acres, while ordinarily the male children of the family would follow along, seeding each row with whatever crops were to be harvested later that season. Enough food had to be grown to sustain the family until the next harvest, with enough left over to sell or trade for other essentials. The lives of women were also a lot harder in that day and age. A wife was not only subordinate to the whims of her husband, but was expected to keep the house. Basic chores such as doing laundry could be a long and arduous process, using a scrub board and a bar of tallow or lye soap made from animal fat and hydroxide, then wrung out and hung on a fence railing or clothesline. She would also do the cooking and cleaning, with the female children and other family members in the home pitching in. There weren't many established towns in this region back then, and many people lived in communities made up of their immediate and extended family. Several of these settlements can still be found spread across southwest Louisiana, such as Johnsonville, Nye Community, and Slaytontown, along with Henderson and Reeves, just to name a few. A slew of others can still be found on street and road names, and then the names of many local businesses throughout our area. In those days, doctors were few and far between, and people relied on old folk remedies that usually consisted of herbs, tree barks, or distilled alcohol for everything from the flu to the various epidemics that were common throughout the 19th century. With its warm, humid climate and plentiful wetlands, southwest Louisiana has always been a breeding ground for disease-carrying mosquitoes. In the days before proper pest control and modern sanitation, malaria and cholera, along with other bacterial infections, were very common. The infant mortality rate was 4 times higher across the nation than it is today, with nearly half of all children dying before they reached adulthood, and half of all women would die during or shortly after giving birth to a child, due to infections and other childbearing complications. The average life expectancy of a person was around 50 years old, and a boy was considered a man once he had gone through puberty, and a girl was considered a woman at the discretion of her father or oldest male member of the family. This was before the women's suffrage movement, and like blacks and other minorities, women had very few legal rights at the time. Something as basic as a woman getting married often required her father's approval, and it was a common formality for her prospective husband to seek her father's blessing before a proposal was ever even made. Quite often folks were married in the church they attended, but it was also very common for no formal services or exchange of vows to take place. In many cases, once a woman moved in with a man, She was considered his wife in the eyes of society and the law. Religion was at the center of American culture and society, at a time when the only book most people owned was the King James Bible. Most folks attended church on a regular basis whenever possible, and the local pastor held a sizable degree of influence in any given community. Southwest Louisiana has deep cultural ties to East Texas, and it can be argued that it sits at the crossroads between Cajun gumbo and Texas barbecue. The vast majority of the local population has deep family connections to their neighbors across the Sabine River, given that most folks in this region are descended from loggers and timber workers from the Lone Star State who flooded into the area in the early 20th century timber rush, shortly after the railroad came through in 1897. This region has a sizable population of people commonly referred to as redbones. These folks are a heavy mix of Creole, Cajun, Spanish, and Native American ancestry, and make up around 4% of the region's population. Most folks here in the southwestern corner of the Bayou State never traveled more than 20 miles or so from their homes at any given time, if ever in their lives, and could go for long stretches of up to 3 to 6 months or more without laying eyes on anyone outside of their immediate or extended family. All overland transportation through the backwoods between the Calcasieu and Sabine rivers in those days was either done on foot or on horseback or by horse-drawn wagon, on makeshift roads that tended to follow old hunting paths or game trails, and a trip from Natchitoches to Lake Charles would have taken a person an entire week or more before the arrival of the railroad and later automobiles and paved roads. It would be the coming of the region's first railroad line that helped link the breadbasket of the American Midwest to the Gulf Coast that would finally open southwest Louisiana up for growth and economic development that would see its people and its landscape permanently altered, for better or for worse, over the coming decades as the 19th century faded into history and the 20th century dawned over the thick, dark pines and deep, grim swamps of the Louisiana Badlands.